This little beauty is the Panasonic Lumix GH5. It was released in 2017 and is regarded by many people as one of the best mirrorless cameras for independent filmmakers. The question is, will this camera still hold up in 2021? This is honestly one of the best things I've bought all year. Alright, enough of that. Welcome back to the channel and Happy New Year. Why have I put it back already? Yes, this video is all about the Lumix GH5 and whether or not you should still have this in your camera bag. This isn't necessarily a full in-depth review of the camera, it's just my honest opinion about whether this camera still holds up in today's world that's full of amazing camera releases that on paper sound like they'd probably beat this camera. But we're going to go through today what makes this camera still so relevant in 2021. I've already had this camera for nearly 3 years now, so naturally I'm going to start wondering whether I need to upgrade this camera. And on the flip side, you're probably watching this video for one of 3 reasons. You either don't own a GH5 yet but are considering it, you're in the same position as I am where you own the camera and are reluctant to replacing it, or 3, you may be about to buy your first mirrorless camera and you're wanting to know which the best camera is out there. First of all, let me go through the main reasons why I initially bought this camera. I only owned one other camera and that was the Canon 600D. Here it is. Clearly not been used for a while. Back then I knew next to nothing about filmmaking. I just assumed that because it shoots full HD and 1080p, I'd be getting the same quality of footage that you would from an Arri Alexa. It doesn't. As well, I just became a full-time camera operator, so I was looking in investing in my own equipment because as a filmmaker, you want to have your own camera just so you can get out there and film whenever you want to. And that happened at a time around when the GH5 was released, and the features that were announced with this camera were incredible and maybe too advanced for what I knew at the time. So let's quickly rattle through the main benefits to the GH5 for filmmakers. You can shoot up to 4K at 30p 10-bit internally or 60p externally, with some of the other Lumix cameras where when you shoot in 4K 60 you do get a 1.5 times crop. This claims that it doesn't have a crop, however that's technically inaccurate because of the sensor size, you already have a 2 times crop, so see it as you wish. It also allows you to shoot in log with the additional software upgrade. So that allows smaller budget productions a lot greater control over their work when it comes to color grading. You also have all intro recording, dual SD card slots, you can even shoot in anamorphic mode if you wish. All in all, the camera is extremely video orientated. Waveform display, synchro scan, shutter angle. At this point, it sounds like a no-brainer to invest in the GH5. And all those features that I just mentioned above were probably all contributing towards the success of this when it launched. Apart from its low light performance and its autofocus performance, I can't really think of many other disadvantages for this camera at the time of its release. So really the best thing to do is consider this camera in today's world of filmmaking and see whether it holds up. First up is the requirement of the camera. Do I still need this camera? And for me, yes, but not for the same reason that I originally bought it. The delivery output that I send to wedding couples and clients is still in 1080p and most likely for web use. The fact that I'm still able to shoot in 4K 10-bit with all intro recording and all that means that I can still use this camera for a few more years. Which then leads us on to relevance. And with this, it's actually quite difficult to accurately compare. To compare the features that the GH5 has with the market value at the time of release to today, you do have better cameras out there now because naturally technology has evolved, some of it has become cheaper and therefore you can pack more into a camera for the same price that you could a few years ago, including cameras like the Lumix S5, the Fujifilm X-T4 and even the Blackmagic Cinema Pocket Camera 4K. They still have incredible features and all for around a similar price of what the GH5 was when it first came out. However, with today's market value of I think it's around 1,300 quid, that's a very tempting price tag. What I suggest is to consider the following to work out whether or not you should invest in this camera now or something with a few more features. The stage that you're currently at as a filmmaker and your professional development, the lens selection that you're currently invested in, and where you imagine yourself to be in a few years' time. There are cameras out there now like the Sony a7S III for example. You're able to shoot 4K at 120 frames per second, which now that costs around 3.8 grand for a body only, so it's not cheap. You also have Panasonic's full frame range, so the Lumix S1, the S1H, they're all capable of shooting 5.9K RAW externally. If you've already got the features that you know you need and want for a few more years, but then want to look at something like a camera with greater dynamic range or higher frame rates in 4K, that's when you might start thinking about not necessarily investing in this and something else. The amount of usage this camera gets is one of the major factors as to why I'm considering whether or not that it still holds up in 2021. Many of you who follow the channel will know that I own the Lumix S1, and that's what I'm shooting on now. Since I bought that camera, this one has just been gathering dust in my camera bag. I didn't mean for that to happen, but it just naturally has. I'm not going to sell my GH5, that'd be silly. However, I now own another camera that is going to future-proof my work for years to come, meaning that, unfortunately, the GH5 has become a default B cam. That isn't a bad thing though, because having a good quality B camera opens up more opportunities than you might think. For instance, you can now have a second camera angle for any interviews that you might do. This for me now is also a dedicated gimbal camera for when I'm shooting weddings. When it was just this, I was constantly swiping it on and off the gimbal, depending on whether I wanted to shoot handheld or using the gimbal. Whereas now this remains on the gimbal all day while I shoot with the S1 as my main handheld camera. Could also be a dedicated top-down shot for any demonstration videos, or it could even be a really good quality behind the scenes camera for any productions that we're doing. It's got so many options that camera will still be used for, just not in the way that it was originally used for. Also, not to mention that the GH5 doesn't have a recording limit, and it also has a flip out screen, which I do miss because the Lumix S1 doesn't. This is... So that alone makes it a perfect B cam for solo shooters like myself. If you're on the lookout for your first mirrorless camera, the GH5 is a very good option to consider, even in 2021. The video orientated features in the GH5 took my filmmaking knowledge to the next level, almost fast tracked it quicker than I would have done with another camera that might not be as regarded as a filmmaking video camera. Scenario number 2, if you have an unlimited budget and you can get any video camera you want, there are obviously better cameras out there which are packed with even better features than the GH5. If you already own the GH5 and you're using it professionally and it's the only camera that you have, I'd still recommend keeping it. Then once you're in a position to invest in another camera rather than replacing it. So then you'll have a professional 2-camera setup. You don't need to replace a camera until it becomes outdated, and the GH5 hasn't yet. The features and the quality and everything that comes with the GH5 is still incredible. The perfect all-in-one camera still doesn't exist. Even in 2021, the GH5 also isn't perfect, and it won't ever perform perfectly for every potential shooting scenario. But the video quality that you get out of this camera, the professional built-in features, and considering the price today, it's a great camera to have. I kind of miss it actually now I'm talking about it. Anyway, I hope this video has helped you out in some way. Let me know in the comments if you own a GH5 and you agree or disagree, or if you have any questions whatsoever regarding this camera, drop them down below and I will take a look at them. In the meantime, have a wonderful 2021, and as ever, I'll see you in the next video.